Okay, let's call the meeting for the planning commission for May 2nd to order. We have roll call, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Here.
Commissioner Jameson. Here. Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
Chair Williams.
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Or if somebody wants to make
Flexible.
how can I forget that?
So, just eager.
Yeah. Would follow with me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, back to approval of the order of the agenda. Anybody want to change anything?
I don't want to change it
Do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
There's no one in the audience
Did anybody online?
and no one online.
No one online. Consent items, the only consent item is the minutes. Is there anybody that would like to speak on the consent agenda?
There's no one.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any comments from the commission? Could we get a motion to approve?
I so move.
A second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I think I need to, because of the minute.
Yeah, you did abstain. Anybody want to report on ex parte communications? About items on the agenda? Moving on to the public hearing. Could we have staff summary, please?
I can just interrupt. I think, because this is the issue I was complimented on the last meeting, that I leave the room when we're discussing and voting. That would be my feel. The second item I can talk about, but I can't on this one.
Okay.
So tonight we're going to go forward with a recommendation of the Planning Commission to consider the ordinances for Title 21, Title 11 of the Municipal Code to address walk-up food service windows facing outdoor patios and seating areas on private property in the TRZ zone. And Chelsea has done work on this, so we're going to let her finish the presentation.
We cannot hear you.
There. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Chair Williams and Planning Commission members. Happy to introduce this item. As Lori said, we discussed this item last meeting, so I think you all are familiar with the background, but before you today is a revised, a proposed ordinance and staff report reflecting the comments that the Planning Commission made at the last meeting. Specifically, you all requested that staff consider adding some criteria to the to allow these private these windows facing private patios, but to add some criteria so that the patios would be of sufficient size to allow people to line up without spilling out onto a public right-of-way or sidewalk, and to allow the line to not interfere with the seating area where people might be trying to enjoy themselves on the patio, and make sure that any disability access standards are met. So we've added that criteria to the language that you saw last meeting, and that is reflected in the formal draft ordinance in attachment B, but then in more of a track changes version, so you can see the changes against the current code in attachment C. So we're happy to just, take any questions from the commission about this revised language reflecting your comments.
Okay.
So
thank
if
you,
I could just
Chelsea.
expand a little bit on that also, in that, in the staff report, it summarizes what Chelsea just brought up. But there's one other suggested provision, which would be in this C2 retail district. And so we just wanted to point that out, that the initial ordinance was not proposed for the TRC zone. I mean, it was proposed for the TRC zone, but not C2. So Chelsea, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Sure, thank you, Lori, for pointing that out. So the city council gave direction to the planning commission to consider whether to allow walk-up food service windows facing private patios in the TRC, because that's where the current scope of the prohibition lies. But we noticed when we were doing our research for this to address your comments that the C2 retail commercial district has similar allowed permitted uses, including restaurants, bars, and cocktail lounges that might want to make use of a walk-up food service window. There's currently no prohibition in that zone, so they're situated a little differently. And we just wanted to point that other zone out to the planning commission. You have the option at this point to amend the resolution and the ordinance to include the C2 retail commercial district if you wish. And I think we could probably do it surgically enough that if we talk through the language tonight, we don't have to bring it back. Staff could make conforming edits consistent with the planning commission's recommendations to the city council and update the written materials that will go to city council. Or you can proceed as direct, as we've discussed and laid out in the draft ordinance before you tonight, which again, the city council only asked for planning commission to consider this issue within the TRC. So that would be you would be acting consistent with what the city council asked you to look at. The C2 retail commercial district would be kind of an extra item, the related extra piece, if you wish to consider that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I do, and I brought this up last time, I just want to be clear, once and for all. This is a food service window only, so this is not retail, this is nothing, there's no other stores, but it's only food and beverage.
That's correct.
So if a retail store wanted to have a walk-up window, then we would have to do this all over again for the retail section of the business.
So the prohibition is only for food service walk-up windows.
Are you suggesting then that a retail store today could have a walk-up window?
Well, the zoning code is permissive, so generally things are, things are allowed when they're put in the code to say this is a permitted use in the zone. So I think it would, there'd be something that would be part of a permitting process. I don't know, Laura, if you want to elaborate on that, but
Sure.
yeah.
The way the current ordinance is written, it says no new or expanded walk-up food service windows shall be permitted in the TRC zone. It doesn't say no new retail.
Can you read that
windows.
sentence one more time?
Under definitions, walk-up food service windows, no new or expanded walk-up food service window shall be permitted in the TRCs, or the tourist commercial district in the city. And then, as you read this new wording, it says notwithstanding the foregoing, walk-up food service windows will be provided to serve outdoor patios and seating areas on private property permitted in the TRC zone.
Okay. So thank you for that. Now I have one more question, just based on what you said. You said that this is a food service window. Can this be beverage as well?
Yes, and
Including alcohol?
yes.
Okay.
And it basically in the definition section, it says food, beverage, and other consumable items, ice cream,
Sure.
those kind of things.
Thank you for the clarification.
One thing to add, in the permitted uses section for the tourist commercial district, retail stores are a permitted use, but within that language, it says provided such enterprises are conducted within a completely enclosed building. So even though this particular provision that we're looking at is discussing food service windows, I think that scope of the retail store permitted use being that it has to be enclosed in a building would limit their ability as a retail store to have a window service like what we're talking, analogous to what we're talking about for a food service type business. So I think we can, they're treated differently under the code already, I guess is what I'll say.
Thank you. Laura, I do have a question if you don't mind, Jack. So the C2, I just wanted clarification on the C2. That's not a zoning, because you said this is regarding the tourist-related commercial, so it's TRC. So we're not talking about down by CVS on Alamo Pintado or, you know, that shopping center, Nielsen's shopping center. Is that what we're talking about there?
Yeah, the TRC zone is just within the village core. The C2 is down by the old Nielsen's Market, Valley Fresh and all of that area. So that's C2. So within those little retail spaces along within the C2, the strip mall areas, is ability, if you want to allow for a window to be created in some of those within their patio areas. As long as they don't have pedestrians out in a public right of way.
Right. Just thinking about how they are right now, I don't know how it would be feasible, but I'm just thinking for the future, if someone changes a building or remodels or something, should we restrict them as, or, you know, should we leave it inclusive for that area as well?
And that's why Chelsea, when she was looking through the ordinance, added this added paragraph in the staff report, considering for your consideration or direction to the city council to consider the C2 as an ability to have window service
Okay.
if they so choose.
No, and then the other question I had more probably directed to Chelsea is, should we have language in there? Because it just, the way it reads, walk-up food services are not permitted, notwithstanding. And I remember the issue when we talked about it last meeting was the fact that we don't want a walk-up window directly on the sidewalk because it kind of creates a public nuisance, people lining up and creates a traffic jam. Should we include that language in there? Like it's, you know, we don't want a walk-up window on a sidewalk, on a public sidewalk, because it's, or not for a reason, but just saying, hey, we don't want this. Should that be included, or is that just kind of implied within the language as written?
So with the language as written, there's a general prohibition, and then the only exception is the one that's in bold there, which does not permit someone to have a window facing a public sidewalk or allow a line even from a window facing private property to impact the public sidewalk. So I think the concern that you're raising, the type of food service window that we want to avoid, is effectively prohibited by the language as proposed. If the planning commission wants to be more descriptive, that's certainly, you can recommend that to the city council. I don't think it will change how this is implemented though. It would be, again, more descriptive, but the prohibition that you want, that I'm hearing that you want, is there very cleanly at this time and how it's drafted.
It's not if I want it or not, I just want to make sure it's clear and, you know, it's understandable for future generations. So,
That was our intent in drafting, but if it doesn't seem clear, we're happy to tweak the language.
I have one question. Is it a requirement that in order to have a walk-up window, you have to have a patio as well?
The way this is worded, we have several different options. One of them is just, it's an area for a line to form, and our recommendation was 5 feet wide, 10 feet long. So the window would actually be 10 feet inside the property, along that
So-
property line.
So you could have a alley 5 feet wide and 10 feet long and have a walk-up window in that alley.
Correct. But again,
Assuming
the
that
alleyway would,
private property.
Yeah, is it on its private property?
Yeah.
Not along the alleyway?
Okay, well, it was, when I was reading it, it wasn't clear if that was correct or if you had to have a patio, because it says opening onto a patio or seating area. It doesn't say opening into an alley.
Well, again, the line could not be in a public right-of-way, and all of the alleys are city public right-of-way. So the window, the line, whatever that would be formed, would be on, need to be
I'm
on the
thinking
property.
of spaces between two buildings,
Right. And,
and all those spaces are city-owned?
yes, they would have to be at least 5 feet wide.
Okay, good. I was-
Chair Williams, I think if I can try to understand what you're getting at is perhaps there's a property that has maybe several buildings on it, but it's one, site, and there's some spaces between the buildings that maybe aren't being used as a seating area or what we would maybe call a patio, but there's room for this size of a lineup area that we've put here. And you're wondering if that would be allowed to have a walk-up window there?
That's correct.
Yes, I think the way that we've drafted it, that would be allowable, because the patio is kind of a squishy word. It's supposed to capture outdoor spaces. We didn't want to try to list every, we could have said courtyard or other synonyms. But I think the patio or seating area is to distinguish that it doesn't have to be, the most common might be like a window from a restaurant into their outdoor seating area where people are dining, but it could be that there isn't outdoor seating and it's just a space that's part of the business. But it has to be of a minimum size for them to use it with a walk-up window. So I think the answer is yes, it would contemplate that, but it's not going to be I think an alley might be a little misleading because alleys are typically public right-of-ways, even though they're in between buildings. But you could see it happening in some sort of a courtyard, even if it's kind of a narrower space, as long as it meets those minimum requirements of size.
A breezeway.
Breezeway.
Breezeway, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's take it to public comment. And that's not on this item. 6:85. Let's take it to public comment. Anybody? Tracy, do you want to speak on this item?
Hi, I'm Tracy Beard from the Solving Chamber of Commerce. I have a concern on retail, selling out of windows. I have a great concern of that because we have some public right-of-ways right now that are in this community that have expanded their business outright into open patio spaces that are covered. And I don't think that's quite in our community, and I see a possible window going on there and a change to put a food court within that area that's being taken care of right now, and I don't think that we're in favor of having retail, so I want to be sure I understand that right. This was not including retail at all. in
That's
that.
correct.
Okay, because that
was Scott's question.
That was Scott's, I wanna make sure it was laid out right, but that we make sure that, we look at those kind of spaces very generously and very conservatively on both sides of what we're talking about as we make this a, new ordinance. Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody online that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Just to point out again, that these windows have to open onto private property. They can't open onto a public right-of-way or a public sidewalk.
So in addressing Commissioner Rodriguez's comment, the only suggested wording that might help allay that concern is in the first line of the walk-up food windows, it says no new or expanded walk-up food windows fronting public right-of-ways
Sounds good.
shall be permitted in the TRC zone.
I think that may add, I think it just adds clarification unless Chelsea has something to say about it.
So I just,
I guess I would, if you want to add the clarification, I would make it in a separate sentence, because what's nice about the existing sentence is that it covers all walk-up windows, however you could conceptualize them. And if we add qualifying language to that first statement that Lori just read, it will potentially create loopholes. So perhaps leave that sentence as it is, and we could add a separate sentence that says, walk-up food service windows, facing a public sidewalk are not permitted, or, this includes walk-up food service windows facing a public right-of-way as a separate sentence to add the clarification, but then we still have that broad prohibition to rely on. So if somebody comes in with a very creative way of doing a walk-up food service window that we did not anticipate, that is still going to impact a public right-of-way in a similar way, we have a nice, clean statement to rely on.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to go at earlier.
So, what do you think of that, Scott?
I'm good. I had one more question. Okay.
How about you, Jenny? So it sounds like we'd like you to go ahead and add a sentence to that effect. That won't trigger having to bring it back to us, will it?
no.
No.
Okay.
And the question I had was just regarding what we were talking about, private, kind of in the same realm, is the window is not gonna go, when you say private property, I just wanna make sure it's not private commercial property, meaning like private residential, you don't wanna be a nuisance to someone's backyard.
This is only in the commercial TRC
TRC,
zone.
but there are some residential areas that are adjacent to the TRC.
It's only in the TRC zone, so if there's residential, it would not be allowed. Because most.
No, I'm not saying having a window in the residential, I'm saying that let's say the window's in a commercial, let's say it's a restaurant, and they open up a window, but their patio is up against someone's backyard that's behind, they're still kind of in the TRC or adjacent to the TRC. That's what I'm saying, so.
Yeah,
I mean,
I appreciate that clarification. I'm just envisioning that virtually all of the TRC zone is framed by public roads, except for the southern section where there's some side yards along the TRC. So I can appreciate what you're suggesting here, and I'm not sure if because most of those are already existing residential homes that have been converted to maybe an office or some other use
Right.
within the TRC, and it doesn't seem to frame the ability to do a walk-up window in there, but
But I think at one point it was kind of implied, am I right? That like, it's not against private property. Maybe I'm just getting confused myself and saying, you can't do this. Because we did talk about it, like someone doing it at a residence, but obviously we're not going to do it in a residence, it would be.
again, there are some existing still residents in the TRC zone, and, right, exactly.
If I could jump in here, Lori, I think what might help is the fact that if you're gonna have a business at all in a residence, even if it's in the TRC, you have to get a home occupation permit. And that permit is gonna limit like what can happen there.
No, that's not what I'm saying though. I'm talking about an adjacent business that's adjacent to a residential property. So these homes across the street, if someone, like where the Theater Fest is, if it wasn't Theater Fest and it was Joe's Popcorn Stand or whatever, or the, the cheese shop, and they decided to open a smelly cheese window and then smelly cheese windows going on next door. That's what I'm trying to get at, is trying not to create a nuisance for someone who's living next door to a business.
Well, I think this provision is not gonna be implemented in a vacuum by itself. They're still gonna have to meet all the other requirements to, have their project proposal approved. And certainly if something's gonna create a nuisance, there are other provisions under the code to prohibit nuisances. So, they'd have to have the minimum size and everything that we're talking about here, but if they're proposing a restaurant use that's gonna be super, like a patio use that's gonna be extremely loud or something next to a residence, like we have noise ordinances to deal with that. So I think, there's other restrictions, I guess, that might address that issue.
Okay, fair enough, yeah. I just wanted a clarification because we did talk about private property earlier, it was mentioned.
Right.
I have a question on the C2. That's not in the resolution right now,
Correct,
as I recall.
yes.
And what would be the justification for us putting it in?
Well, I think it would be, if you would like to treat the zones consistently. So currently, there is no prohibition on walk-up windows in the C2 zone either. So there's no need to carve out the walk-up windows facing private property. But there's also no prohibition on walk-up windows facing public property. So if that is a concern, because, restaurants, bars, and cocktail lounges are permitted uses in the C2 zone, but it's not the same area, because it's not the tight, commercial core of the city. It's maybe it's a little farther outside, and there's bigger uses like grocery stores and things like that going on. So perhaps that's a distinction that's okay, but we wanted to bring it to your attention that, restaurants are permitted, the same type of businesses that we've seen interested in walk-up food service windows in the TRC are also permitted in the C2, but there's no regulation of walk-up food service windows. So the justification would be if you think that walk-up food service windows might be a concern and you'd like to regulate them or suggest that the city council regulate them similar to the TRC.
Okay, my feeling is I don't think we should add that in.
I agree, Jack. I think it's kind of excessive at this moment in time. I don't think it's necessary.
What do you think?
I'm ready to go on this one. I think we're all set.
Okay, so sounds like we don't want to add the C2 in.
That's fine, we just wanted to bring it forward to you so you can see how these things can kind of ripple through the other ordinances and other provisions. So we're good with this, moving forward with this clarification.
So can I get a motion to move forward with this resolution with the added sentence that we discussed?
I make a motion to move forward with resolution 22-03. This is the amendment of Title 11 of the Southwind Municipal Code to address the walk-up windows, and we will also accept the change that Commissioner Rodriguez had brought up.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0.
Thank you.
One abstention, or recusal, excuse me.
Yes.
Welcome back, Commissioner Hughes. Ask for it.
Sorry to keep you on out there with all the questions.
No. Okay, moving on to item 6. Could we have staff report, please?
Sure, again, we'll be doing a tag team here with me and Chelsea. And so this is,
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? Because I abstained or recused myself on the last one, I did make some calls, and you can't get 100% from Sacramento, but on this issue, because they believed it is not only citywide with restaurants, but a food truck can be from Lompoc can come here, or San Luis Obispo, it affects the entire city. Therefore, it's more general than me having a restaurant with particularly a to-go window. So I just wanted to explain, because people might think, well, why could you, didn't feel comfortable on the first one, but on this one I do. And that was the guidance I got. Anyway, thank you.
Very good. So as a spin-off from the discussion that we had last month in regards to the service windows, we also talked about food trucks and the ability for where they can be located throughout the city. And some of the discussion was on food trucks on private property. And so we just wanted to bring some more information forward to you in regards to how the city precludes food trucks on private property currently, and how we should proceed forward if we are to allow food trucks in certain areas throughout the year. There are certain cases where we do have food trucks, particularly at special events, and we have allowed that to occur. But on a general rule, on private properties, we do not allow food trucks. One of the reasons is that food trucks take up parking, and you have other needs such as trash or restrooms, and there's a whole series of things that need to be considered for a food truck that normally aren't considered, especially if during a special event you already have some of those facilities already available. So it's just a different setting rather than just having a food truck at a particular place on a private property. So Chelsea, if you wanted to step in on this as far as some advice as to moving forward.
Certainly, thank you, Lori. So we talked about this a little bit last meeting, but we've expanded on it, and with your direction from last meeting that you were interested in seeing code language to more clearly prohibit in the code having vending in general, not just food trucks, prohibited on private property. And Lori's explaining that as a matter of practice, food trucks are not allowed to just park on private property in Solvang and run their business, but they have been permitted with special events permits in the past, and potentially, as I explained last time, there's some limitations on what Solvang can prohibit on public property, such as streets and right-of-ways, because state law has intervened and sort of preempted the field. But if you look on page 16 of your agenda packet, at least the version I'm looking at, and it's the first page of this staff report, there's some proposed language that would add a new subsection F in section 1112-7, business uses. And it would just very clearly add a prohibition to not sell or provide or serve any consumable good, such as food or beverages, or sell any non-consumable goods to the public from a motor vehicle or any other conveyance, whether it's motorized or not, on private property in the TRC district, the C2 retail commercial, and C3 general commercial district, unless that business or person has received a minor conditional use permit for parking lot sales, or which is something specific to, I believe, the C2 and C3 districts, or a special event permit issued under the code. And so that kind of establishes clearly in the code what Lori was explaining is our current practice, and makes it very clear so that the inquiry staff has been getting about food trucks and other, well, maybe food trucks, but this would cover all types of vending. In the TRC, there's some clear language in the code for staff to rely on. This is coming before you for general comment. There's no draft ordinance yet or resolution for recommendation to City Council. So we're really just looking for your thoughts and direction on the language that we proposed based on your comments last time. In your staff report, there's also some additional information to help with your consideration. The direction we received last time was to draft language that would prohibit food trucks and vending on private property. But if there is an interest for the planning commission to allow but regulate such uses, then we put in, starting on page 2 of the staff report, some potential criteria that you could consider for how to allow but tailor that allowance so that any food truck or vending use would not be problematic on private property. And then there's just some information about, you know, what state law allows. The city's got more flexibility on private property to regulate such uses, but on public streets and right-of-ways, the state law is going to preempt, and Solving Municipal Code under Title 4, Chapter 4 kind of already addresses the scope of what Solving can do to regulate vending on public streets. So that is already in the code. And then there was one question last time about whether food trucks could be parked in somebody's driveway in the TRC for those few residential, you know, houses that are still there in the TRC. And the answer is no, because if you're at a residence, you have to have a home occupation permit, and that home occupation permit says your business has to be operated out of a room, and you can't keep vehicles related to your business on the property. So you wouldn't be able to have a food truck and operate out of a food truck on those residential properties in the TRC. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chelsea. Any questions?
Just curious as to why staff didn't recommend prohibiting in all zones, including industrial and residential, because it's only saying the TRC and the C2 and the C1. You know, I mean, because if I read that, I could go to my house and put a food truck for the weekend, perhaps, if I wanted to. So if we want to prohibit them, let's just say eliminate all zones in the city. That's my, and I wonder if there was a reason for that, if we had to allow it somewhere.
I think the only reason is that and Lori, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the inquiries staff was receiving were focused on the commercial sectors of the city, and actually even more in the TRC. And so we even we expanded it a little bit to the other commercial zones, but our focus was on the commercial areas because that's where we were seeing the interest in having food trucks. But we certainly could take that recommendation to expand it to a general prohibition.
Question I had was, if we're not deciding anything right now, but I mean, I remember Ed St. George at the last meeting, he was kind of against them. I'd like to hear from more of the public and see what they think about it before you actually make a decision on anything. Because maybe some people do, maybe some people don't, but if the general consensus is we're against them coming into town, I mean, it's like, hey, they don't want them here, then we should just go with what Aaron said, just no, except for special permit, special parties, use, events.
Well, that sounds like a good segue into public comment. So why don't we go to public comment now? And I just have one speaker slip, Tracy again.
Hi, Tracy Beard with the Solving Chamber. I really think we need to make sure we do this in all the zones. People pay a lot of money, our businesses, to be here, and I think it would be so wrong to bring food trucks in. I think we need to look at our parks, Hans Christian Andersen, that you can't get a food truck out there, or possibly at Sunny Fields. I mean, we have businesses that our mothers do for fundraisers out there at different times, and I think we need to make sure we protect our local sporting, areas when they're out there doing fundraisers for raising money out of those different booths, and not have a food truck out there. And I think Mr. Peterson is correct to make sure we do this in all areas, no food trucks. Because I could put a food truck down by the river and do that and take care of my business that way out of a food truck and catch all the bikers going by. So, I mean, you have to really think how people think entrepreneur. I'm already seeing other people come in at different times to do small little businesses for cups, for juice cups or things for that. And we don't want that in this community. We pay a lot of rent, a lot of money, and we want to protect our community very much so. So thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. There's nobody else here. Is there anybody online that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Lori, you like you wanted to say something?
No, I was ready to respond to any other comments that you have.
Do we have any other comments?
We're giving you direction, you want direction from us as to eliminate them all, eliminate some, or just leave it alone as it is, or just be more clear with eliminate. I mean, you want some direction from us.
Yes, and truly, we do get probably at least once a month somebody calling and asking about food trucks. So I think listening to what you're suggesting here today will help guide us in bringing back a change to the ordinance. We will report this to the city council, get their direction, and then work through the process and bring back something to your planning commission and then city council.
That's why I'd like to hear from people first. You can't make a decision if you don't know what they want.
Okay.
So do we just put it on another agenda? I mean, how do
It
we
would
hear
have to
from?
be, after it goes to city council.
Well, I know that's way down the road, but I'm just saying, should we put it on next month and ask for people to come again? I mean, we asked for them to come here, but I know people don't read the agendas. And in defense of, it's no one's fault, but man, this is early in the month to have a meeting, it's a Monday and it's the 2nd. So I mean, that has also, everyone's kind of on their heels, I think, that everyone's thinking it was next week maybe, that we had a PC meeting. So I wouldn't mind having it come up again, but let's just do it again at the next meeting, and if people want to come, they come. But we can't just keep asking that. We can't just every month have it, but I'm up for doing it again next month if we think we'll get more people here.
Don't you feel a little, not lost? I mean, there's already an ordinance in place for it, so do we, why, I don't understand why we would need to make a decision right now when we don't have really any direction.
I think just for clarification, currently we don't have an ordinance for food trucks.
Okay.
We
that's
do
why.
have now state law providing for it on public
I thought this
streets.
was already in
No,
the location filming and the parking lot sales and walk-up food.
those
service.
are there, but the actual food truck provision is the one that we don't have, so.
Got it,
Your
okay.
item F
Yeah.
that you're proposing,
Yeah.
which I think is good. It covers most of what I think we discussed last time. But I guess the question is, would we like to ask them to expand that to the whole city and not just specific zones? And then bring that language back next month for public comment again?
I feel like there's value for the whole city.
And it gives us another public hearing to have people come speak.
Yeah.
Because it's on the agenda, we're making that change and chat. Not that we're making any decisions, we're just, that's why I agree.
So what I envision happening here, and of course this will be with Zena and Chelsea, is that we will be taking the first ordinance to the city council. I believe it's May 23rd, their city council meeting. And we can put this on the agenda for additional direction from the city council, then bring it back to you to discuss further, and then we'll go into ordinance writing after that.
So if I may jump in here on Zoom, I actually won't be going on May 23rd because that agenda is extremely full with a financial plan. So if we wanted to bring it to city council for any general comment, that would be at probably maybe June 13, we can squeeze that in. Another option, this is not a public hearing yet, and we're getting some feedback from you, so we could actually schedule it for public hearing if you feel like you're getting pretty close in your recommendations, and bring that back to PC at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's what we're asking for.
Okay. That's your direction?
Is there any problem, Chelsea, in rewording that? I wouldn't think there would be.
No, I don't think so. I just want to think about how it works with like a micro home kitchen or home occupation and see if some of this might, because like restaurants and food service things are not permitted uses in residential zones, right? So if I'm trying to think through like how you could have a food truck permanently on your driveway. It doesn't seem like it's a permitted use at all in a residential zone already. Whereas, so maybe we're talking about we don't want them there for special events, but state law, we're pretty limited. We can't, we can only have limits for like, if it real strong ties to like public health and safety reasons. We can't just say we don't want them at all. Because state law has already carved that out. So we'll have to think through how to phrase that. The direction I'm getting is that we don't want to allow food trucks and vending as much as possible throughout the city, including in residential. Am I capturing it correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Santa Barbara, though, does not allow them in residential. I mean, they're specifically, they carve out historical districts, the beach, waterfront, residential, and they only allow it in some areas. So I just kind of like you folks talked about those the windows. I mean, just be as specific as we can, so we don't have staff having to say, well, I got to go back and get clarification. Just if we're saying none, then say none anywhere. Mm-hmm. If we want to carve something out, but I would just be absolute across the board if that's the direction we're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll just want to look to make sure that we're not running afoul of any of the state law restrictions on what we can do. And I'm assuming that Santa Barbara has maybe made some of those health and safety time, place, and manner findings to allow them to restrict food trucks on maybe their public and things like that. And this is, it's vehicle code section 22455. So we can look at that. Maybe there's good reasons why you want to restrict in certain neighborhoods, like if there's access or something like that. But staff will think through that and work with, the planning staff will work through that to come up with some good language that doesn't run afoul of any of the areas that are preempted by state law.
Okay. So, and I don't think we're looking for that to go to the city council before it comes back to us. We'd like to review it here and get public comment on whatever we come up with before recommending something to the city council. That feeling.
So we'll bring something forward to you at the next meeting. We'll talk about the are scheduled, but we do have, I think, time to have this come back to you.
Great.
Okay. But thank you very much for your directions.
Okay, are there any planning commission comments? Nothing? Staff comments? Anything further?
Yes, just a couple of updates. First of all, for your next meeting, we have a couple of items that are getting prepped for the hearing. Behind Park Place on First Street is a recent area that has been demoed and cleaned up, and we will be bringing a planned development permit forward to you for 3 new residential units on that site.
So where's that again?
You know where Park Place, 1600 Mission Drive, right behind it on Fur is. the three little buildings were taken down.
Behind the Park Building. Oh,
Yes.
it's on First Street, not Park,
Yes.
oh, Park Place meaning the square.
Yes,
I'm sorry, I was thinking of Park Place, a road, because we have a park.
Sorry, I
Yeah, sorry about
apologize.
that, on First Street, yes,
Yes,
I got
yes.
you. Yeah.
On Fir,
Some resident-
it's a DR zone, and so, it's a small lot, 3 units will be, planned for that site. And, we will be taking that one to the DRC first at their next meeting, going through all of the architectural elements and everything else. That'll be their final review, and then it'll come to you for approval. So, project. The other one that most likely be coming before you also is the old bank building, which is now being will include a market deli and a restaurant. And that is ready to bring to you at the next meeting. Again, it'll go to the DRC first for their recommendations and then come before you. So those are the 2 items right now that we have planned for the Planning Commission, and based on the work that we do for the food trucks, we'll also have that. Unless there's anything else that's I want to bring forward to the Planning Commission.
I just have one staff comment of a more personal note. I think as all of you know now, I am expecting a baby very soon. And this is actually going to be my last meeting before I go out on leave. So just wanted to let you all know that. And that during my leave, my colleague Craig Steele will be filling in. He's a very experienced attorney, and you'll be, it's going to be good to have him. He's going to be very helpful. And I'll be back later this year after I take my leave. It's been wonderful working with you all. I'm back.
Good luck.
Congratulations, Chelsea. Yeah, we look forward to you being back as well.
Thank you very much.
So I did have a couple of other quick items. The DRC meeting for April 19th is going to be pretty full. At 3:30.
May 19th.
19th, yes, sorry. At 3:30, the DRC will be going through the design for the general plan update, and from so they'll be going through that from 3:30 to 5:30. Then they'll go into their regular session. The other items that we have queued up, the first 2 projects we already referred. Samson Medical Clinic will also be on their agenda. Review that. We have project should be ready for another review by the DRC. And then we have the building that your planning commission approved before the DRC existed, which is 1420 Mission Drive, Nyborg and Mission Drive. It will have some conditions that require DRC review. So this is one of the few legacy projects that were in between the reviews. So the DRC will be reviewing colors and materials and lighting and landscaping and those kind of things that were approved by the Planning Commission but had conditions for DRC to review. And then the last item is a project at the very east end of Laurel Drive. It's referred to as Bella Vista, and it is a project that was approved probably, I'm going to say 12 years ago, 15 years ago. There's 3 residential lots at that corner, and the condition for those 3 lots is to go through the DRC review, but now DRC. So that will also be presented. So they have a big meeting coming up.
Do.
Yeah. So just wanted to brief you on some of the things that they'll be tackling, and we'll look forward to reporting back to you.
The one at Nyborg,
Yes.
after they do their thing, that's not gonna have to come back to us, is it?
No, this was a condition of approval from the Planning Commission to go back through the development, or the DRC.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other comments?